"You may still refuse me," the Duke of Vardon said, with the pen already in her hand. "The register is not signed. Say the word and I shall have the carriage brought round and tell them all it was my doing." Nathaniel watched the girl in the borrowed lace look up at him across the vestry table. She was 24. He was 45. Every person crowded into the church behind that door had spent the morning saying so. "And my father's creditors?" she asked quietly. "Paid this morning, whatever you decide." He kept his voice level. "That is not a lever, Miss Wren. It is simply done." Honora Wren looked at the pen, and at him, and something crossed her face that he could not read and would spend a year learning to. Then she bent and wrote her name in a clear, small, unhurried hand, and the thing was finished. They rode back to Vardon Abbey in a closed carriage with a hamper neither of them touched. She sat very straight with her gloved hands in her lap and watched the hedges. Nathaniel, who had commanded a regiment and buried a wife and gone 12 years without needing to explain himself to anybody, discovered that he had no idea what to say to her. "You will have the south rooms," he said at last. "The bell is by the bed. Mrs. Purley has your keys." "Thank you." "Your rooms have a bolt on the inner door," he said. "It is a good one. I had it looked at." She turned her head then and studied him for a long moment. "Your Grace is telling me something." "I am telling you that this marriage saves your sister's schooling and your father's name and gives you the rank to hold your head up in a county that has been unkind to you," Nathaniel said. "It requires nothing else of you. Not tonight. Not this year. Not ever, if that is your wish. You will not be pressed in my house." The hedges went by. He thought perhaps he had insulted her or relieved her, and could not tell which, and the not telling was a new and unpleasant sensation for a man of 45. "You are not at all what they said," she said. "What did they say?" "That the Duke of Vardon is cold as a church floor and buries what he cannot bend." Honora smoothed her glove. "My uncle said it as a recommendation." "Your uncle," Nathaniel said, "is a scoundrel who lost your mother's harp at cards, and I would not have him in the house except that he is your blood." He heard how it came out and did not soften it. "Forgive me. I am out of the habit of company." She said nothing for a mile. Then, very low, "How did you know about the harp?" Nathaniel looked out of his own window and said the estate needed rain. The Abbey took her in the way old houses take in new people, grudgingly, and then completely. Within a month, the servants had stopped saying her grace as though it were a question. Within 2, she had the still room in order, and had rehung the pictures in the small drawing-room where the damp had got at them, and had begun to walk out in the mornings with a sketchbook, coming back with her hem wet and her cheeks red. Nathaniel kept out of her way. That was his rule, and he had made it deliberately on the drive home. A man of 45 who has bought a young woman out of ruin has exactly one duty, and it is to be so scrupulous that she is never for 1 hour afraid of him. So he dined with her at 7, and read to her from the newspapers, and answered when she spoke and asked nothing, and lay awake at night listening to the house. What he did not do was tell her anything. He did not tell her that he had known her father, a mild, foolish, gentle clergyman turned gentleman farmer who could not add and could not say no, and that when the man's chest went bad in the winter of the great frost, the apothecary's bills had been settled quarterly for 4 years by a hand that was not the family's. He did not tell her that the harp her uncle had gambled away had gone to a dealer in Marbury, and been bought back within the week, and had been standing under a dust sheet in the Abbey's North Gallery for 11 months. He did not tell her that he had seen her, once, 2 summers ago, at the Fenley Assembly, standing against the wall in a made-over gown, while 3 girls with better fortunes laughed at her sleeves, and that she had listened to an old deaf widow for an hour with her whole attention and never once looked at the dancing, and that he had gone home that night and sat a long time in the dark. A man does not say such things. To say them would be to hand a girl a bill and call it a gift. So he said nothing, and she began to look at him sideways, the way one looks at a locked door. In November, her sister came at Christmas and stayed a fortnight, 12 years old and loud, and the house rang. Nathaniel found himself teaching the girl backgammon and being beaten at it, and looked up once to find Honora watching them from the doorway with her hand at her throat. She was to have gone to a place in Ipswich, Honora said that night at dinner. A cheap school. My uncle arranged it. She writes to me now from Miss Dean's at Bath, which is not cheap, and when I ask her who pays she says the trustee. Does she? Nathaniel said. There is no trustee. My father left nothing to hold in trust. She set down her glass. Your Grace, I have been in this house 6 months. I have found a harp under a sheet in your north gallery with my mother's initials cut into the pillar. I have found the apothecary's receipts from Marbury in the bottom of a deed box because I was looking for the plan of the herb garden, and you told me to take what keys I liked. 4 years of them. My father's name on every one and yours on none. The clock in the hall struck. Nathaniel set his knife down carefully because his hand was not entirely steady. You were not meant to find those. No, that is precisely the difficulty. Her voice had gone unsteady too. I have spent 6 months believing myself bought. Do you understand? Every kindness in this house I have counted up as part of a debt, and I have been so careful, so grateful, so very correct, and all the time she stopped and pressed her lips together. Why did you not tell me? Because it would have been the ugliest thing a man could do, Nathaniel said. To come to a girl with no money and no protector and say, I paid for your father's medicine, therefore look kindly on me. I would sooner have been thought cold as a church floor for the rest of my life. And so you were. And so I was, and it cost me nothing. I have a great deal of everything, Honora. It cost me nothing at all. He pushed his chair back and stood, because he could not sit under her eyes. The harp is under the sheet because I did not know how to give it to you. I have rehearsed it a dozen times. Every version of the sentence sounds like a man presenting a reckoning. She was crying now, quite silently, and making no attempt to hide it, which undid him worse than the tears. There was a night at the Fenley Assembly, she said, 2 summers ago. Someone laughed at my sleeves, and I sat with old Mrs. Bream so that I should not have to stand where they could see me. Were you there? I was there. Did you see it? I saw, Nathaniel said, a young woman give an hour of her life to a deaf old lady nobody else in that room would speak to, and never once look at the dancing. He found the words were coming out and could not stop them. I went home and sat up till 3, and I told myself I was 25 years too old to have any business remembering it, and I have remembered it every day since. The candles guttered. Neither of them had eaten anything. 20 years, Honora said. 21. Do you imagine I have not counted? She wiped her face with the back of her wrist, like a girl. The whole county counted it aloud in the churchyard on my wedding day. There was a woman in a green bonnet who said, within my hearing, that in 10 years I should be nursing him, and in 15 I should be free and rich, and it was a bargain either way. Nathaniel took that the way he had taken worse things, standing, without moving his face. She is not entirely wrong. She is entirely wrong, and if you say that again I shall go and sit in the north gallery and play the harp very badly until you apologize. Honora stood up. She came round the end of the table and stopped an arm's length from him and looked up. Your Grace, Nathaniel, 6 months ago I did not know you. I knew a tall man in a vestry who told me the bolt on my door was a good one. Do you know what that told me? Everything. It told me everything about you, and I have been finding out since that I was right. And I have been going quietly out of my mind wondering why the man who mended the pictures and the harp and my sister's whole life will not sit within 4 feet of me at his own hearth. Because I am 1 and 20 years your elder, Nathaniel said, and because I am not going to be the man who bought a girl and then collected. You did not buy me. I signed my own name. She said it fiercely. You handed me a pen and told me I might still refuse you and that the debts were paid whatever I decided. Nobody in my life had ever offered me a choice before. I signed because of that, and not one soul in that church would believe it, and I have never much cared what they believe. He could not answer. He had spent 12 years constructing a man who did not require answers. You have given me a house, a name, my mother's harp and my sister's future, Honora said, more quietly. May I now be permitted to give you something? Because that is what you have never once let me do, and it is the only thing I have. What is it? My company, not at 7 at the far end of the table with the newspapers, every day, all of it. Her hand came up and rested on his sleeve, light as a bird, and he felt it through the wool like a struck bell. And in your time, Nathaniel, not mine, when you have stopped being afraid of yourself, a marriage. A real one. I am not a child and I know exactly what I am saying. The fire settled. Somewhere above them, a door closed and a girl's laugh went along a corridor. Nathaniel Vardon put his hand over hers on his sleeve and held it there. I do not know how to be loved, he said. I want you to understand that plainly. I was married 11 years to a woman who could not abide me, and she was not cruel, she was simply correct, and correct is a cold thing to live inside for 11 years. I have got very good at not wanting. If you are kind to me, I shall not know where to put it. Then we shall find out together where to put it, Honora said. You are a duke. There is a great deal of room. He laughed. It surprised him more than it surprised her. A rusty, unpracticed sound that he had not heard from himself in a decade, and she smiled up at him with her eyes still wet, and he raised her hand and kissed the knuckles of it, once, formally, like a man at court, because he had to do something or he would have done a great deal more. Come and see your harp, he said. They went up to the north gallery with 2 candles, and he pulled the dust sheet off it. And Honora Wren stood in front of her mother's harp with both hands pressed to her mouth, and did not touch it for a full minute. Then she sat down on the stool and drew the strings, and the sound went up into the cold, dark ceiling of a house that had heard nothing like it in 12 years. And Nathaniel stood against the paneling with his arms folded and his eyes stinging, and thought that a man could reasonably build the rest of his life around one such minute. It took him until spring. She was patient with him past all reason. They walked in the mornings. She taught him to look at things and draw them badly. He taught her the rents and the drainage and the names of every family on the estate, and found she remembered them better than he did. In February, she moved her writing desk into his study without asking, and he came in and found her there with ink on her thumb, and said nothing at all except to have a second lamp brought. He told her the rest of it in pieces when the pieces came. The Fenley Assembly, the apothecary, the night he had sat up till 3. Each time she listened without triumph and put her hand somewhere on him, his wrist, his shoulder, the back of his hand on the arm of the chair, until at last he stopped flinching at it. On a wet evening in April, at the foot of the great stair, Honora stopped with her candle and said, "The bolt on my door is a very good one." "I had it looked at," Nathaniel said. "I have never used it." She held out her free hand to him, "not once in a year." He looked at her hand for a long moment, at the small, clear, steady hand that had signed its own name in a vestry when it might have run. Then he took it and blew out the candle, and the stair went dark, and the old house kept its own council. They were together 19 years. The county waited a long while for the bargain the woman in the green bonnet had predicted, and got no satisfaction from it. What it got instead was a duchess who knew the name of every child on the estate and the state of every roof, who founded the school at Marbury, and would not have it called after herself, and who was seen, at more than one assembly, taking her husband's arm in the middle of the room, and saying something into his ear that made the cold Duke of Vardon laugh out loud in front of everybody. When Nathaniel was old and his chest went bad in a hard winter of its own, she nursed him herself and would not have it done by anyone else, and it was not a duty and never once looked like one. He asked her, near the end, whether she had ever minded the 20 years. 1 and 20, Honora said. Do not correct a dying man. I shall correct you as long as you are here to be corrected. She had his hand in both of hers. No, I have never minded. You gave me the only choice anybody ever gave me, and I chose you, and I would have signed my name 100 times. The harp stood in the south window of the small drawing room where the light was good, and it was played most evenings badly, by their daughters, and then by their daughters' daughters, and none of them ever knew that a duke had bought it back from a dealer in Marbury within a week, and hidden it under a sheet for 11 months, because he could not think of a way to give it that did not sound like a bill. But Honora knew, and told them all, at every christening, every wedding, every Christmas, until it was the only story the family cared to hear, that the coldest man in 3 counties had loved a girl in made-over sleeves from the far side of a crowded room, and had spent 4 years paying for her father's medicine, and had never intended her to find out.